dramatic intro to the WRX shed build episode. Why did I put up crash cars and crashes? Well, because it actually is to do with the Forest Rally, and today we should be in Busselton for round 2 of the WA State Rally Championship and round 2 of the Australian Rally Championship, the Forest Rally. Unfortunately, that event has been postponed. I've done a video on that. I'll put a link somewhere about that. Anyway, we're not able to be at the Forest Rally given the current situation, so instead I'm here building the WRX. Let's get on with it. Everything's still looking like a bit of a dog's breakfast inside the car, but believe it or not, I have spent a couple of hours inside there on the wiring loom and got it all into the positions of where it should be. There's a couple of brackets and bits and pieces that I need to bolt this all in and finish it off, but it is getting closer. And also the rear wiring loom now is now plugged in and connected. There's still a pile there to go that's got to be run through, and I'll tackle that when I do the fuel lines shortly. Off camera, I have been busy getting a few bits and pieces sorted out with the wiring loom. I think it's pretty boring just to watch me mucking around with wiring. So a couple of things I've done is I've had to make up some new bungs in the firewall for a couple of bits and pieces. Believe it or not, under there's a lot of sealant, but there is a rubber bung under there. It's not quite the right shape and size for the hole in the firewall, which is quite a large oval, but it is in there and sealed. Also, some of the other bungs I've put back in, like this one down here for the air conditioning, because we're not running an air conditioner in the car, obviously, and sealing that up. And couple here, you can see one on the right and the left. The one on the left of the screen, but actually to the right side of the car, they were heater hose ports. We're not running the factory heater setup in the car, and so they've been sealed. The one on this side here, which would be the left side of the car, is actually going to be used for that wiring loom going through there, or that wire through there at the moment is for the rally trip computer. And also the brake lines, I'll run those through that port there, so I haven't sealed that one up as yet. Another thing that I've done off camera is muck around with this steering column this afternoon. It's taken a good couple of hours to get it to where it is. Basically, it boils down to this and this. Now, they both look very similar. However, in the time from the version 1 in 93 or 94 through to the version 4 in 98, so that 4 or 5 year period, quite a lot changed. I've talked about the wiring loom before. Basically, in the end, what I had to do was use the version 4 steering column and modify that slightly. The brackets aren't quite the same. It doesn't matter for a rally car. Re-drill and muck about to mount the version 1 stalk assembly onto the version 4 steering column. I was hoping to just basically put the version 1 steering column straight in. Unfortunately, it's not quite that simple. The actual steering column mountings are different. They're wider. The columns are effectively the same length, but the bush sizes where they go through the firewall are different, and there's a fair bit of mucking around in it. So in the end, it's got the version 4 steering column in it with the version 1 stalk assembly on it, and that means that all the wiring, as you've just seen, I've just plugged it all in, and that's the easiest way to do this. Oh no, this is something we're going to have to deal with down the track. Of all the things that we see in terms of rally cars that isn't done that well, wiring is probably the worst. It's where most people who do it themselves make the most mistakes. And this is no exception. Now, sure, it's been pulled out from this panel, which probably looked quite good in the old car, and behind it was hidden this bird's nest, which is a failure and a fire hazard waiting to happen. The most common mistakes are incorrectly sized wires. So sometimes people use very thin wiring like this to drive spotlights without relays, or they use that wire rather than the correct gauge wire to handle the amps. No fuses. Now this one does have a fuse box in it. However, whether the fuses are correctly rated is another story. That's another common problem, to have incorrectly fused or poorly fused circuits and switches. And the other one as well is the wiring is the incorrect length, or it's been added onto. We've also seen the wrong type of wire as well. Like sometimes people use household electrical wire to wire up automotive stuff, and that's also a no-no as well. This is the relays that would have been for the spotlights, I'm guessing, and just looking at that straight up, I can see there is no fuse in that circuit. So should there have been a short circuit on one of these relays, or say up to the spotlights were mounted on that old car on the front bumper. If say there'd been an accident, there'd been a knock, and one of these wires had been cut and touching bare metal, that would have shorted out, dead shorted the battery, and potentially created a fire, or certainly melted a whole bunch of electrical wiring in the car. So they're issues we have to deal with. Being a rally sprint car, we'll probably wire in light bars to it rather than the full spotlights. This battery key would have been the main battery isolator from the battery to all the electrics for the car. We won't be putting one of these, we won't be putting this back in again. There's no need to have this system, even under the current rally regulations. There's actually no requirement to have an isolator switch in here, unless you're running at WRC level. Even up to national level, you don't need an isolator. By the time we go through and actually try and tidy this wiring up and sort it out, it's going to be easier to start from scratch and just rewire it. And at the same token, we won't use this panel either. These days we've got a very different design. We've got a standard sort of panel setup or template that we use to make up our panels for WRXs. Okay, that'll do for today and this episode. As usual, things have taken longer than I intended. The steering column took a few hours. It's now well into the evening, nearly 6 o'clock, and I really haven't got as much achieved again as I wanted to. As you saw earlier, I had a crack at putting the fuel lines back in the car. One thing I will say as a point of advice is, if you're intending to use the standard fuel lines in a WRX, keep them. Don't pull them out of the car while you're building it. The set that I was trying to put back in actually came out of the wrecked rally car, and effectively after I scratched the absolute shit out of the paint, I gave up on using those. They're all bent and twisted. It probably wasn't that easy to pull them out of the old car around the roll cage. So I've got another set, the actual set that was from this shell. I will have a go at putting them in and see how I go with that. If that doesn't work, then I'm going to have to resort to putting braided fuel lines in. Now, I did that in a project we built for a customer last year. So this is what it sort of looks like. It does look very flash. However, it does require a fair bit more work. And the only reason that we put those braided lines into that rally car was because it came with no fuel lines in it whatsoever. So we didn't have the option to use the standard lines. I was intending to keep the budget of this car down, not to put stainless steel braided lines in it. And for the large part, there's no real need for that. The standard fuel lines are perfectly fine. Before I sign off for this episode, yes, Chris, I have seen your comments several times about naming the project. And yes, I do watch the guys who are building Project Binky, which is basically grafting a Mini and a Celica GT4 together. It is a crazy, insane project, and I often wonder why they do it, but it is very interesting to watch. And I do watch the Mighty Car Mods guys as well. However, at this point in time, no, I'm not going to name this project. It is just the WRX in the shed. Unless anybody comes up with a really cool name for the project, then leave it in the comments below, and we will certainly consider it. Thanks very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Please like, give us a thumbs up and subscribe, and I'll catch you again soon. Cheers.